Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We are back with part 2 of this bumper install to show you how to put the swing outs on your bumper, whether you have a single swing out or you have a dual swing out. Over the last year and a half, CBI has gone from making around 4 bumpers a week to about 40 bumpers a week. With that increase in business, there's going to be some growing pains. So currently they're working on a new website that's going to have better instructions for all their bumper installs and everything they sell. As of the date of the filming of this video, CBI's website doesn't offer install instructions for all the things that they sell. But if you give them a call, they'll provide you with some instruction that will help you with the install. That's what I did for the swing outs because I couldn't find anything online. I called this guy Kenny at the company. He's super helpful and he sent me a PDF link with some pictures that's going to help me get these swing arms installed. But maybe by the time you viewed this video, CBI has their new website up with all the install instructions you'll need to be successful with installing one of the things that they sell. With all that said, let's get started with this job. All right, let me show you all the hardware I got from CBI for this project. When you start unboxing everything that you got from CBI, you're gonna see packs of different fasteners and you might think, wow, this looks intimidating, kind of like an IKEA project. You get a big bag of bolts and nuts and a 10-page instruction manual, but don't stress out. Get everything unpackaged and get it laid out, and once you have it laid out, things start to make sense and it's not as intimidating as looking at a big bag of fasteners. Let me show you what we got. Starting off here, we've got these end plates that go over the top of the supports for the swing arms. These pins screw in like so. So these go together. These Allen head bolts and these washers affix these pieces to the bumper on either side. You have 6 bearings and 3 per side for the swing arms. These 4 nuts right here, I haven't figured out yet exactly what they are, and they might be extras. I don't have an idea what they're for just yet. These 2 small screws and nuts are for the license plate light. You have 2 oil seals, and these go on the top of the assembly. So there's 2 bearings on the bottom, there's 1 bearing on the top, and then at the very top, you put an oil seal. This is a stopper. This countersunk bolt and nut go with this. Coming over here, these 2 big pieces right here are for the spare tire carrier. These 3 silver bolts with these special washers that hold the bolts in place. These are to hold the spare tire on, so they give you 3 lug nuts. So all these things go together. Then you have all these gold bolts with the nuts and the washers, and this is to affix these 2 pieces together and onto the swing arm. This is your latch mechanism. These are the 4 Allen head bolts that affix it to the bumper. This U-bolt, this sleeve, and this set of 4 nuts, 2 regular nuts and 2 locking nuts, also go with this assembly, and we'll show you when we get to it how they go together. This swing arm is the passenger side swing arm, and this other one here, this is the driver side swing arm. Finally, we have the tray table and all the associated hardware. We have the 2 brackets. We have 2 links of cable and the ends that attach to the ends of the cable. We have the little latch mechanism, so when you put the tray table up, it latches in place. You got these little screws and nuts that go with these 2 pieces. And then you've got 2 longer Allen head bolts with nuts that go with them. And then you have 8 shorter Allen head bolts with all the nuts that go with them. There's a couple plastic sleeves, and then there's black piece. I don't know exactly what these are for just yet, but I'll figure it out. What I have as a reference is what I got from Kenny at CBI. It's a PDF showing me all the components, not necessarily for a dual swing out, but for a single swing out, but it's still providing me vital information of how everything goes together. I'll put a link in the video description to the PDF that I'm using, so if you view this video in the near future and CBI still doesn't have their new website up, you can utilize the same PDF file that I'm using to help you install this. All right, let's start putting this thing together. Fitting the bearings into the arm, they're a little tight. I made a lifeline call to CBI, talked to Kenny, just to make sure that this isn't intended to be a press fit. So he said it's not technically a press fit, but they do fit in fairly tight. And he said that from the powder coating, maybe there's some residual paint inside here. So I just took some Emery cloth. I cleaned out the inside really good. I lubricated it with multi-purpose grease. Set the bearing on top. I have a dead blow mallet and I just tapped it in place. Then I drove it home with this press sleeve. If you didn't have a press sleeve, you might be able to just take some type of punch and hit it around the outside diameter to where you can get that first bearing in the bottom, because 2 bearings go in the bottom. This bearing has a width of about 55 millimeters. My press sleeve comes in at about 54 millimeters. It's pretty much the perfect size to drive the bearing in but not get stuck. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit more grease on here to facilitate getting the next bearing in. Gonna set it on top, try to get it as square as possible, tap it in. That's not that square. Let's see here. Just try to tap it as equal as possible. If you see it going in really crooked, stop and reset. So I'm just going to tap around the outer diameter here. Now that second bearing is completely driven in. Now I'm going to work on the top part. I'm going to get some grease in the top sleeve too. You grab your bearing, get your bearing squared up, start tapping it in place. The bearing is now flush with the arm. To drive it in further, I'm going to use the press sleeve. Put it on top of the bearing, having it go right on the outer race. You don't want to be pounding on the inner race, you want to be on the outer race. And I'm just going to tap around the edge and drive it in. You can tell when it's bottomed out because the sound will sound a little different and you're not going to be able to drive it in anymore. You know you're done. I already cleaned this up with some steel wool because I saw a little surface rust. I think it's a good idea to put some type of lubrication on it to protect the metal. You can probably use anti-seize. I'm just going to use a multi-purpose grease that I use for bicycle application. It's a red grease, and I'm just going to smear some on here. I'm going to go ahead and put a little grease on the inside of the race here too. Same with the top one. This might not be the most comfortable position, but I got my left arm locked out to where I can see that thing is square going in straight. And then I'm using my dead blow hammer to tap it down. Now that it's started pretty good in the bearing, I can stand up and do it the rest of the way. Okay, it's past the first 2 bearings. Now I'm lining up the shaft with the top bearing, and I'm going to pound this down now. And that looks like it's fully seated. The final thing that goes on top is the seal. It's got 2 sides, this side and this side, so I'm assuming that this side faces up. That would make the most sense. I'm going to lubricate it with a little bit of grease. Put a little more grease on the shaft here. Just work it around the edge, get it set right, and then push it in place. Might have to tap it in with the hammer. I got a little cocked here. I'm going to finish driving it in with a brass drift, just tapping it around the edges. All right, that's fully seated. Test fitting this piece over here. It doesn't really want to go on very smoothly because this has a lot of powder coating in it. So again, I'm going to take a piece of Emery cloth and I'm going to clean out the inside diameter of this so it will slide on this post a lot easier. I slid this on top, tried to get the bolts started, and they weren't getting started because these oblong holes were just a little bit shy of being long enough to where I can get the bolt started easily. and it's probably because of the powder coating and everything, making it a little bit thicker, just not fitting right. So I just took this pretty aggressive round file. I filed a little bit on the bottom of each of these to elongate them just a little bit, probably only maybe like a millimeter. It was pretty close to lining up. I put some grease in there, slide it over the top. You get your Allen head bolt and a washer. This happens to be a 7/32 size Allen head bolt. Get it started, and that's it. Grab your other one, thread that one in. And we'll just cinch these down snug. I actually don't have any standard size Allen head sockets. I'm just gonna have to go the regular Allen wrench route to tighten these up for now. Here's a little Allen head set nut. And this is actually a 5/32. I'm just gonna cinch this up. That's tight against the post. This side is almost done. One more thing. I'm gonna take one of these and I'm gonna thread it in. I suppose you can grab a pair of channel locks or something and give it an extra twist to get it really tight. You see how it works. So when you pull this open now, it locks in place. So this has a ramp, and so as you open it up, it pushes the pin up until it locks in place. And that's how this swing out works. I'm gonna do the same with the other side, and no need to show it because it's the same procedure. I'm gonna use some emery cloth, clean out the inner diameter of the swing arm, lubricate it with some grease, knock the bearings in place with a dead blow hammer with the assistance of a press sleeve, and then do the same thing. I might have to elongate the holes on this bracket on the other side. We'll see. The driver's side is finally done now, and like usual in modification land or automotive land, this side fought me more than the other side. The bottom bearings went in nice and smooth. The top bearing, I must have got it a little bit cocked as I was driving it in. I had to place a block underneath here and really pound away to get the bearing to fully seat. And to know that it was fully seated, I just used this little pick tool. I went behind the bearing to feel for the lip. I could still detect the gap underneath the bearing, so I knew I had to drive it in further. Also, I could see, based off of the width of the seal, I knew I had to drive it in more. Lots of pounding. I finally drove this sucker home. When I was sliding this arm down, this fought me more too. It started to go on pretty easy, and then I got it to about this point, and it really started fighting me, and I was pounding away with this dead blow hammer, hitting on the top of the sleeve, hitting here, and I ended up actually bending this down a little bit. So a little bit too much brute force. So I just took a big crescent wrench, put it on here, and bent it back into shape. With this bracket, I had to do the same thing. I had to elongate the holes with the round file so I can get the bolt started. I went ahead and greased up the shaft of these pins so they work a little bit nicer. So let me show you how this opens up now. They look like they're meeting up pretty nicely. It clicks in and clicks in. So finally, both swing outs are now on the bumper. Yay, yay. All right, on to the next step. Now let me describe how the spare tire carrier pieces go together on the passenger side swing out. So you have this piece that goes on first, and it's being held on by the 4 bolts and nuts, 2 on the bottom and then 2 on the top. And then this piece bolts to this piece with another 6 bolts and nuts. You've got 2 bolts on this side, you've got 2 bolts on the top, and then you have 2 bolts on the opposing side. You obviously have choices of how high the tire is going to be sitting on this passenger side swing arm. So right now I have it to where there's 2 empty holes below the bottom part of the mount. The bolt heads are 5/8. The flange nuts are 11/16. So I'm just using 11/16 box end wrench on the backside for this upper part of the tire carrier, and I'm just using a 1/2 inch drive with a 5/8 socket. And no need to see me tighten all these up. I'm just going to cinch them all up tight. So now you have the 3 studs that are going to be used to hold your spare tire on. And then you have these little round, I don't know what you call it, washers. It makes sense that this washer is going to hold the stud onto this piece of the carrier. So I'm going to slide the bolt in and then push this on like so. Now this retaining washer is not going to let the stud fall off. And I'm going to do the same with the other ones. So this has little fins that are sticking out, and I'm having the fins point outward. And then the last one. Maybe use a screwdriver to push it back, that very last thread. That looks good right there. I'll just lift up my spare tire. It's not going to be my actual spare tire for this, but I'll lift up my spare tire and show you what it looks like. Now I would have to say, the one downside to having it on the back is you got to lift this spare tire up to there. The Timmy the Toolman safety message for this video is don't mess up your low back. Once you mess up your low back, you're gonna have a low back problem for the rest of your life, most likely, like me. Use your legs, not your back. So get low, pick this up, use your legs to drive up, and then get this in place. Like so. Then you get the 3 lug nuts that they provided you. And that's it. Cinch it up with a tire iron or whatever you have, and you're good to go. The next thing I'm going to solve is this latching mechanism. I need the U-bolt, I need the 2 regular nuts, and then I need the 2 locking nuts. Looking at the picture diagram, you screw on the regular nuts first, get the other one going on the other side, slide this into here. There's a little cutout flat section on one side of the sleeve, and then the other side is round. It's kind of hard to tell from the picture, but it looks like the flat side goes towards the regular nuts. And then we're going to put the lock nuts on the back side. Next, I'm going to get this thing bolted up. This is obviously going to take some adjustment to where it's locking securely and not too tight but not too loose. So I'm going to leave this loose for now. I'm going to get this bolted up to the passenger side of the swing out. There doesn't appear to be any washers with these, so they're going to go on bare. No washer. Before I do the final adjustment on the latch, I'm going to put this bump stop in. So it looks like it's going to go like so, with the countersunk bolt going underneath and the flange nut on top. This is also a 3/16 Allen. Doesn't appear that you have to hold the flange nut on top. Okay, that's nice and tight. The reason for the bump stop is so when you have weight on this, it's not putting as much pressure on the bearings. So that bump stop is taking up the gap between the swing out and the actual bumper surface. These nylon lock nuts and the regular nuts are 1/2 inch. So I just have a deep socket because there's going to be a lot of studs showing when I get this in the right spot. So you have to mess with this. You have to adjust the regular 1/2 inch nut and the nylon locking nut to where it locks it down, but there's not a bunch of free play. So I know I got to go in a little bit more. So I'll adjust this in, tighten up the nylon lock nut a little bit, adjust the other side in. Let's see where this gets me. Just a tiny bit of movement. So I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit more. That's pretty firm. These inner nuts here are right at about the 6th thread. Coming from the start of the threads forward, they're right about the 6th thread. Now I'm just going to cinch these up tight. I'm going to hold the 1/2 inch regular nut with an open end wrench and tighten it down with the socket. That seems pretty firm. This mechanism was a little sticky, so I sprayed some WD-40 on it. Now when I latch it in place, this automatically locks. Before, it was staying up like this. So maybe just a little bit of lubricant, maybe silicone, WD-40, whatever. Loosen up these hinges a little bit so they work better. Next, let's get the Jerrican holder. And what's a Jerrican? A Jerrican is something you carry fuel in. And I'm gonna carry 2 5-gallon Jerricans on the back here. So if you want to carry Jerricans, you have to have a Jerrican holder. Here's the Jerrican holder. It looks like you got 4 holes that are most likely meant for it, these oblong holes. So it looks like it's the bottom 4 holes of this Jerrican holder that are lining up. This again is a Allen head bolt with a washer coming in from the front. I've got 1 in. Once you got 2 of them in, you don't have to hold it anymore, obviously. These are also a 3/16 Allen head, and they have a 1/2-inch flange nut on the back. So what would be a Jerrican holder without a couple Jerricans? I found these online. These are a NATO approved Jerrican. So if you want to follow my lead and get the same one, I will put a link in the video description of the ones I bought. I figured out the proper orientation for the Jerricans is with the handles closer to the vehicle and the spouts facing furthest to the rear. The bracket that holds the cans firmly in the carrier, the flat section goes here, and then the angle section comes down, and it appears the way it's designed, it's to keep the spouts from being able to open because it pretty much locks down very close to the pour spouts. You have the supplied wing nut that holds this tight, and you have an ability to lock it. So I just put a padlock on there just to keep the abrasion down and maybe noise down. I put a piece of Velcro, the fuzzy side of the Velcro on here, glued it on to where when this slides around, it'll make a little bit less racket. These Jerricans come with a pour spout that can clip in on either can, but this bracket that holds the cans on gets in the way of it. So I just have the pour spouts in a bag in the back of my truck. They're not going to be really able to stay on the can with this bracket holding them down. Now let me show you how to get the tray table installed on your passenger side swing out, or if you have just a single swing out, not the dual swing out, how to get it onto that. With our videos, I usually show you how everything goes together in real time. Because the PDF file I was using as a reference didn't have a picture that showed enough detail for me, while I was assembling this thing, I made the wrong guesses of how it went together. So what I'm saying is I didn't have very good luck guessing the orientation of some of these parts. In other words, if I would have went to Vegas, I would have lost a lot of money. So instead, what I'm going to show you is how everything goes together as it sits on the vehicle. The first thing you should do is get the brackets attached to the swing arm. The proper orientation for the bracket is the tab that sticks out further from the main body of the bracket. That goes on the top, on each side. To attach the bracket onto the swing arm, you use 2 of the shorter Allen head bolts and 2 of the nuts. There's 1 bolt here, and then there's 1 bolt below. The next thing you do is you get the tray table attached to the lower part of the bracket, down here. You affix it to the bracket with the longer bolts. So remember, there was 8 short Allen head bolts, and there was 2 longer ones. The 2 longer ones are to attach the tray table to the bracket. Also remember, at the beginning of the video, there were a couple white bushings or white sleeves that I wasn't sure what they are for, and I figured out these are for the connection of the tray table to the bracket. You slide the bushing through the outside, and then it also fits into the hole on the tray table, and then you take your long bolt with a nut on the back side and you tighten it up. The tray table has 2 holes on each side. one to connect it to the bracket, and one for the cable to connect to it. The hole that is closer to the edge of the tray table is the one that you connect to the bracket. This one right here is a little bit further away from the edge, and this one is for the cable to connect to. If you tried to switch it around, it wouldn't work because you wouldn't be able to bolt it up, and also the latch holes would be on the wrong side. You wouldn't be able to install the latch because the latch holes would be back here. It wouldn't work. So now you have the tray table attached to the brackets on both sides. The next thing I would do is work on getting the latching mechanisms attached. You have two pieces that make up the latching mechanism. You have this piece that attaches to the tray table with two of the screws and nuts, and then you have this half of the latch mechanism that attaches to the swing arm with this black spacer. This was another thing near the beginning of the video that I wasn't 100% sure what it's for, and I finally figured out it's a spacer between the swing arm and this part of the latching mechanism. And this also affixes using two of the supplied small screws and the nuts on the back side. To get these two pieces to line up nicely, all the adjustment happens on this piece, not on this piece. These holes in the tray table are just perfectly round holes and don't offer any adjustment. The holes in the swing arm offer adjustment left and right and up and down. So you keep these two screws a little bit loose, and then you manipulate it to where it lines up really nicely with the opposing part of the latch. Once you have it lined up really nicely, then you just lock these down with a Phillips head screwdriver and you're good to go. What I noticed tightening these screws down is that the nut holds firm. You don't necessarily have to hold the nut on the back side while you're using the screwdriver on the front, because once the nut hits the metal, it kind of locks in and doesn't move, and so you can do all the tightening just with the Phillips head screwdriver. You don't need to hold the nut on the back. When you're done tightening the screw, just make sure it snaps together nice, like so. If you remember from the beginning of the video, there were 8 short Allen head bolts. 2 are used for each bracket for a total of 4, and then the last 4 are used for the cables. 1 here for the bracket and 1 here for the tray table on each side. Now let me show you how we went about getting these cables to the right length and the ends crimped. What you have to do is you have to put the cable into these ends and crimp it. If you have a special type of wire crimpers, that I have this kit that I just recently bought for doing wiring, I'll put a link in the video description to this one if you want to buy the same one. But if you don't have any wire crimpers, you could just take a pair of pliers or channel locks, whatever you have, and crimp the cable into the end. I'll show you the crimping procedure on the next end. Utilizing a carpenter square, we're able to see that the tray table's perfectly perpendicular to the swing arm. Now we're going to set our length for the cable. It's already attached up here, and so now we just can hold it up to the end, which we got this end already bolted up to the tray table, and that will give us a good idea. So it looks like we could just cut it right there, and it's going to be the perfect length. So you just slide the end over, and this one has all kinds of different size connectors. So I'm going to start with the one that's not going to squeeze it down as far, and then graduate up to the next size. So I want to crimp it kind of in the same line with the other one. I'm going to go the whole width of this end and crimp it down. Now I'm going to graduate up to the one that's going to crimp it down even further. This is going to be tighter. And then crimp it one more time towards the end. These are kind of cool because they're ratcheting. And this is a 5/32 bolt and a 7/16 nut. That's all there is to it. I purposely left the nut and bolt a little bit loose so this will pivot as you bring the tray table up. Next, let me explain to you how I wired the license plate light. The easiest way I found was tapping into the trailer hitch harness. If you have the tow package, you're going to have this harness wired to the tow hitch. The 2 wires that I tapped into are the white wire which is the ground, and I tapped into the black wire, which is for the taillights. If you don't already have the tow package with this harness going to a tow hitch, you're going to have to do a little bit of extra work if you're going to follow my lead. Now on my 98 4Runner, I unfortunately didn't have power going to this. I used a test light and I didn't find any power when I was running the lights or hitting the brake lights or the turn signals. It wasn't working at all. So what this told me is my converter box was not working. And how did I know that? Well, I experienced the same thing on my 2000 4Runner. When I went to use a trailer for the first time with my 2000 4Runner, I realized the trailer lights weren't working. And I did a little investigation. I pulled off the driver's side rear panel to get behind the taillight. I found the converter box and I realized that's why I wasn't getting power to this harness. So I went to Toyota thinking I could just buy a replacement converter box, but the problem was Toyota doesn't make the converter box anymore, so I had to wire in a new converter box. And back around 4 years ago, I just used this Hitch place near where I live to install a new converter box for me. On my 98, I went ahead and took on the challenge and wired in my own converter box, and I'll explain to you a little bit later how I did that. So let's just assume for now you have a tow hitch package and you have power to this harness. What you would do first is get the two wires you need. You need your ground and your tail light. So on this one, it's white and black. I would pull these wires away from the main harness. You would pull away this white and black wire away from the other two wires to the point where you plan on splicing. Then you grab whatever wire cutters you have and you clip the wires. Then you strip the ends with whatever tool you have. Give each end a little bit of a twist so the wires stay together. And now we're going to strip the other side. Now we have two bare ends coming from the vehicle electrical harness, and then we have two bare ends that go to the trailer hitch plug. Use whatever connector you like. I actually chose a butt connector with shrink ends, and the reasoning for the shrink ends is since it's going to be underneath the vehicle and exposed to the elements, the shrink ends form a tight seal around the sheathing to keep water and other contaminants out. So you would slide it on the end, you grab your crimping tool, you select the correct size. It's actually color coded for the right size connector, and then you just ratchet down and crimp it. Like so. Do the same with the other one. Next, we have to splice in a couple wires to run to the license plate light. I chose to use the colors white and black to match up with the light that CBI provides you. Your black is your hot, or for the tail light, and your white is your ground. We're going to connect up white to white, so we're going to get the ends of the sheath together. Ideally, you have the amount of copper showing equal on both wires. You twist them together. Then you put it into the correct connector on this side, making sure you're connecting it to the one for the ground. So I made it easy for myself. It's white on this side and it's also white on this side. So you slide this into the connector and you come in with your crimpers and you crimp that side down. Then you do the same thing with the black wires, which is going to give the light power. And you crimp this side down. So now you successfully spliced into the trailer hitch wiring with two wires, one for the ground and one for the power for the light. You're going to have to run links of these wires from where you spliced in along the bumper towards the driver's side to the driver's side swing arm and then to the light itself. So now let me go underneath the vehicle and show you how I did the routing. I'm underneath my truck and I'm pointing at the passenger side. Many of you, if you had the tow package provided from the factory, you bought the vehicle like that, or the person who originally bought the vehicle bought it like that, the converter box is going to be behind the driver's side tail light, not the passenger side. I think my previous owner bought the truck without the tow package and then they added it afterwards, and that's why it ended up on the opposite side. That's my theory. This right here is going from behind the passenger side taillight. It's going through the body and exiting out here. I put the split wire loom on just to protect the wiring underneath. I spliced into the trailer hitch harness right about here. All the wires to power the lights for the hitch travel through here, go down here, and end up in this plug. And then the two wires that I use to power the license plate light travel through here and then go through their own split wire harness along here above the frame rail. Then it goes around the body mount and travels towards the rear of the vehicle. I started off with a 1/2-inch split wire loom, and that 1/2-inch wire loom went all the way down to the hitch plug. Then at this point, I reduced it to a 3/8 size to run the two wires to the license plate light. You'll see I use a zip tie to affix it here. I use a zip tie to affix it here. I put a zip tie here. Then I use a zip tie to hold it to this body mount. Now I'm going to get out from underneath the vehicle and show you how the rest of the routing worked. It travels up here. The wiring loom is zip tied to here. Then it goes through this provided hole in the swing arm. It's zip tied here. It goes through the swing arm here. Travels through this side. Is zip tied right here. And then it finally goes to the light. You can see that the wiring for the light, there's a white wire and the black wire. And again, your white wire is your ground and your black is the power. So you just connect up the same colors. So if you followed my lead and used the same colors, you won't mix it up. And this is where I put the butt connectors to connect the wires I ran to the wiring for the light. Now let's say, for example, your vehicle never came with the tow package, or a previous owner never added a tow package with the necessary wiring. Since you just bought a bumper that came with a tow hitch, you may as well add the necessary wiring so you can tow something if you ever need to. When I was searching for a converter box as a replacement on my 98 4Runner, I came across the eTrailer website and I saw that they have a pre-built harness that you can plug right into the harness on your Toyota 4Runner, and it's all plug and play. The connectors are all correct. I read the reviews and it sounds like people had good success with this harness so you can run trailer lights. I'll put a link in the video description to the eTrailer website so you can see what I'm talking about and maybe choose to buy that harness. Now the model years might be specific. The link I'm going to provide you is for a 98 4Runner. So you just have to go back and select the proper year and possibly the proper vehicle if you are doing this on another vehicle, say a Toyota Tacoma. Then after you get that harness installed, then you just do the same thing that I showed you earlier. You splice into the harness and then you just run those two lines to power the license plate. Finally, I'll describe the situation that I was in. My rig had a tow package added at some point, but because the converter box was bad, I wasn't getting power to the end of this plug. So I had to replace the converter box. I went to a local hitch company in my area. I bought this taillight converter from them that's made by Curt, and the model number is 56130. The Curt box looks exactly like this. You have 5 wires on one side and 4 wires on the other side. This side connects up to the wiring harness on the vehicle, and then this side goes to the plug that you plug your hitch lights in, right here. The whole reason why you need a converter box is vehicles have what is called a 3-wire system or a separate lighting system. These systems will have turn signal circuits that are separate from the brake light circuits. Trailers, on the other hand, are on a 2-wire or a combined system, meaning the brake lights and the turn signals are on the same circuit. So a converter is needed to take the separate signals from the vehicle, combine them so that the trailer lights operating on a combined system will work properly. You could see on this factory Toyota trailer hitch plug that I pulled off my 98 4Runner, it says right on there that the circuit doubles for the blinker and the stop lights or brake lights on both of those blinkers. So it's left stop and right stop, so it's a combined circuit. The green is the right turn signal, the red is the brake lights, the yellow is the left turn signal, the brown is your tail lights, and the white is the ground. On the vehicle, there's a plug that looks like this coming from the vehicle electrical harness that plugs into one side of the converter box, and then you have another one like this leaving the other side of the converter box going to your hitch lights. So to wire in a box like this, I had to cut off this connector off of the vehicle harness. But before I cut off this end on the vehicle harness side, I figured out which color wire was for what. I used a test light, I turned on the headlights and figured out which one was for the tail lights. I turned on the left blinker, figured out which wire was for that. I turned on the right blinker, I figured out which one that was. And then finally, I had somebody help me by applying the brakes, and I figured out which one was for the brake lights. And then finally, the last one was the ground, and that one was easy to see because it was the white wire that went to a ground behind the tail light. And now I'll share with you what color wire was for what on the vehicle harness. Solid green was for the tail lights. The green and black wire was for the left blinker. The green and yellow wire was for the right blinker. The green and white wire was for the brake lights, and then the white was the ground. What you can't see in this picture is on the other side of this converter box, they have it nicely labeled what wire is for what. Same with this side of the converter box, it tells you what wire does what. Once you have all these connections made to the vehicle harness, I would suggest you either use some double-sided tape or maybe some Velcro and affix it to the body behind whichever tail light you're working near. On my truck, it's near the passenger side tail light. You might find that you're attaching it to the driver's side tail light. Doesn't matter. Affix it so it's not rattling around in there. Now this plug is not going to fit through the body as is through the provided hole. The hole was close to being the right width to fit this plug through. So I just took a round file and widened the hole in the body just a little bit bigger to where I can fit this plug through. If you don't want to do that, your other option is to cut the wires, feed the wires through the body, and then make the connections again with a bunch of butt connectors or whatever connector you want. So there's that option too. Once you have all the wiring done and this plug is near your hitch receiver, you do the same thing I showed you earlier. You splice into the ground into the taillight wire, and then you run those wires to your license plate light, and you're done. Now let me show you where the license plate light actually affixes on the driver's side swing arm. It's right underneath the Jerrican holder. So go down here, and the light affixes right here with a couple small screws and nuts on the back side. If you had a single swing out, it would be a similar mount. And notice my new custom plates. Sick mods happening at Timmy the Toolman's place. Sick mods. Now let me show you what the light looks like on. There it is, all lit up. It works. Right next to the Jerricans, we have our high lift jack mount. It mounts to the very end of the driver's side swing out if you have a dual swing out setup. If you have a single swing arm setup, it's either on the bottom and it's mounted parallel with the ground, or it's mounted on top. I'm not 100% sure. The dual swing out is mounted in a vertical position because you obviously can't mount it horizontal. It wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to open up the dual swing arms. The provided hardware to mount the high lift jack onto the driver's side swing out, it's 2 1/2-inch bolts that are 1.5 inches long with a washer and a flange nut. This is a coarse thread, 13 threads per inch thread count. What I found when I mounted it where I wanted this part of the jack facing inboard. I didn't want to be sticking outboard so it can grab something. I wanted it as high as possible, but not obscuring my license plate, so no cops would pull me over and give me grief. I thought everything was okay with how I mounted it until I tried to open the swing arm. When I opened up the swing arm, as it came this direction, the jack hit this bracket, and so it wouldn't open up all the way. The fix that I came up with is I bought some longer bolts and flange nuts to push it further away from the swing arm. So let me explain to you what I bought. I went to a local fastener shop and I bought 2 longer bolts. These are the bolts I bought. They are 1/2 inch size, just like the ones that provided by CBI. They're also a coarse thread. They're 13 threads per inch, and these are 2.5 inches long. Then I bought 2 packs of flange nuts. There's 3 flange nuts in each pack. They are 1/2 inch, and again, they match the thread pitch at 13 threads per inch. I went through the back with a bolt and a washer. Then I stacked up the 3 flange nuts to push the high lift jack further away from the swing arm. So this will give me the clearance I need, so when the swing arm opens up, the jack doesn't hit this bracket anymore. So even with those stacked flange nuts pushing the high lift jack further away from the swing arm, you'll see as I open it up, this jack barely clears that bracket. Now it's fully locked. I basically have it the perfect distance away from the swing arm to allow the arm to fully open and lock and not have the jack hit the bracket. Let me share with you which holes I use in the high lift jack to mount it to the swing arm. Counting from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The bottom stud is in the 12th hole. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So the upper stud is in the 23rd hole, counting from the bottom on the high lift jack. I also used a paint pencil and put a couple paint marks on the 2 holes that I'm using on the high lift jack. So if I ever remove it, I know exactly which holes I need to use to put it back up onto the swing arm. Now let me share with you a couple little accessories I bought for the high lift jack. Number 1, this little thing right here slides over the top, and what it's for is to keep the handle from being able to fly out on you while you're driving down the road. That's what this is for too. It holds the handle against the jack, but I definitely wouldn't rely just on this to keep the handle securely attached to the jack, because I could easily see how this clip could come loose and then the jack handle is going to go flying out towards your driver's side, which wouldn't be good. The other thing I bought is this doohickey. What this is for off-road applications to do jacking. So if you're in soft dirt or mud, this basically gives the jack a bigger platform so the jack isn't going to drive into the ground as you're putting the weight of the vehicle on the jack. What I used to affix this jack plate to the jack, I bought a 3/8 inch size bolt that's 4 inches long. I put a washer on the back, then I put a washer on the front with a wing nut. I found an alternative place to mount this off-road high lift jack mounting base. I originally had it up here, but it's like a big air dam sticking way up in the air. I didn't really like it for that, and I just didn't like the way it looked mounted there. So I found a hole on the Jerrican holder that will work to mount it to the side. It sticks out a little bit. It's still not exactly as clean as I would like, but it's definitely better than being mounted up there. Just like with the Jerrican holder, this is a combination master lock with a 2-inch shackle, and based how far I have the high lift jack mounted away from the swing arm, the 2-inch shackle just makes it to where this lock will lock in place. Don't let thieves have an easy time stealing your stuff. Make them work for it. So this way they'll have to have a bolt cutters to cut it off. Speaking of making things harder for thieves, is don't give thieves an easy way to steal your spare. What I did is I ordered the same wheel locks that I already have a key for from this company called McGard. If your Toyota came with wheel locks, they most likely came from the McGard company. So if you have the information that came with the wheel lock set, you can go on the McGard website and order some more locks. So what I went ahead and did is I ordered 3 wheel locks. That might have been overkill, but I wanted to make it hard for any thieves to try to steal my spare. Now going on the back side, the 2 upper bolts are accessible from the rear, so I was thinking that maybe a thief can get a wrench on there and still be able to get them loose without the lock key. But the bottom one is hidden behind here. You can't get to it with a wrench. So I think that's the one for sure you want to put a wheel lock on, the one that is recessed behind here. Here's the long-awaited final result. This is the passenger side. Coming around to the rear. I now have my full-size spare on. Jerrican holder with 2 jerry cans. Got the high lift jack mounted on the driver's side swing arm. Got the off-road high lift jack base. Here's another look at my new custom California plate. Sick mods, people, sick mods. And then coming around to the driver's side. This is what it would look like if you were following me down the road and you're wondering, where did that guy get that cool rear bumper? With this rear bumper, now I guess I'm the coolest kid on the block. Everybody's gonna want to copy me, so CBI, get ready for a bunch of orders. All right, we're done with this job. I think I've effectively shown that a do-it-yourselfer like me and like you can install a CBI rear bumper all on their own. You don't need a shop to do this. You just have to have a little bit of patience and you'll get it done. Here's some things I wanted to emphasize to watch out for from part 1 and from this part 2. In part 1, the one thing that I want to re-emphasize is make sure that you have the bumper exactly where you want it before you drill those 2 holes on the ends of the frame rails. Make sure it's lining up nicely with the fender flares. Make sure it looks good from the back and the spacing between the body and the bumper. Make sure it's exactly where you want it. Then mark the centers of the holes and drill them. If you find that the hole wasn't perfectly drilled, all you have to do is grab a round file, remove a little bit more material, and then you'll be able to get the bolts in and you'll be good to go. In part 2, the main thing that I had a hang up with is getting the bearings into the driver's side swing arm and then also getting the arm down onto the support post. Getting those bearings in is all about finesse. It's not brute force. You want to get the bearings squared up well with the arm, tap it in place. Then if it's either the top bearing or the first of the 2 bearings on the bottom, you grab your press sleeve or you grab a punch and then you slowly work it down evenly. What happened to me on that top bearing on the driver's side, I ended up getting it cocked inside the swing arm. And because I wasn't patient, I just started using a little bit more force to drive it in. And what I should have done is I should have took a measurement from the top of the sleeve to the bearing and figured out which edge of the bearing was higher. That's the side that you want to hit and get it back square going down evenly. I know for a fact, because I didn't take the time to make that measurement, I probably got it even stuck worse because I hit it in the wrong location, getting it more stuck into the arm. So learn from my experience. Take your time getting those bearings in. If you find that it starts to get stuck, stop, reevaluate, figure out which side of the bearing is high, and then tap on that side, get the bearing re-squared with the sleeve of the swing arm so it will drive in really easily, because these bearings will go in easily if you do it right. Now, getting the arm down onto the support post, I did it just like I did the passenger side. I looked from below, I had the arm squared up with the support post, I tapped from up above, got it started into the bearings on the bottom, and then I stood up and I started hammering it down. Once the support post got past the bottom bearings and then was driving into the upper bearing, all of a sudden it started fighting me. My one theory is maybe I wasn't supporting the arm enough and I didn't have it perfectly squared with the bearings, which forced me to use more force to knock it into position. If you find it's going in rough and you have to use more force, don't do what I did and hammer really hard on that ramp that the locking pin travels up and locks in place into. Because with enough force, you can bend that thing, and that's what I did. So I didn't damage it too bad. I just had to put a big crescent wrench on there to bend it back into shape. It wasn't that bad, but don't do what I did and hit that thing really hard. If you're gonna hit it hard anywhere, maybe just get a block of wood and hit it on top of the sleeve. Don't hit really hard on that tab. Another thing I want to mention is you notice that my bumper came powder coated really nicely from CBI. That's an option. You can get the bumper in bare metal and paint it whatever color you want. Just know that that's an option that CBI offers. If you want it to come powder coated, they'll do it for you. Another thing I want to mention is CBI will do custom work. When you call the company and make your order, all you got to do is ask and tell them what you want to do, and they'll let you know whether they're willing to do it or not. Let your imagination be your limiting factor. If you have some type of idea, pitch it to them and maybe they'll do it for you. With all that said, thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. We will be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Take care. Bye-bye.